Welcome to Faith Wonders, where real stories of faith and miracles come alive from around the world.
The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days. Gray skies hung over the small town of Saint-Remiel like an unhealed wound. In a modest house near the edge of town, a man sat alone, his eyes fixed on the television screen, though he wasn't really watching. His name was Ethan Ward, 42 years old, a construction engineer, once known for his precision and pride. But tonight, his hands trembled as he gripped a glass of whiskey. On the screen, a news reporter spoke about a Marian procession happening nearby, a crowd walking through the streets, holding candles, praying, singing hymns to the Virgin Mary. Ethan scoffed, muttering under his breath. "Fairy tales for the weak," he said, his voice hoarse. "A mother in the sky who fixes everything? Nonsense." He turned the TV off with a slam. The sudden silence rang louder than any sound. From the corner of the room, a photograph caught his eye. His wife, Clara, smiling beside a small child. The boy's hair was blonde, his eyes bright, barely 5 years old. The frame was cracked, dust had settled on it. Ethan reached for it, his expression tightening. Clara and their son, Noah, had died 3 years ago in a car accident on their way back from church. Ethan was supposed to drive them that day, but he had refused. "I'm not wasting another Sunday with your superstitions," he had said. The guilt, sharp as broken glass, had never left him. The police said it was a drunk driver who crossed the line, but in Ethan's mind, it was simpler. God took them. Or more precisely, God didn't care enough to stop it. Since that day, something inside him had rotted slowly. He quit praying, then quit working, then quit believing in anything. His anger needed a target, and he found it every time he saw the image of the Virgin Mary, the one his wife used to pray to every night. That same statue now stood in the town's churchyard, newly restored, painted white and blue. People called it miraculous. Some said it wept once. Ethan only felt disgust. One night, he passed by the church after a long evening at the bar. He stopped at the gate, watching the statue illuminated by streetlight. Her eyes seemed to glisten, her hands open, as if offering peace. "Peace," he spat. "You took everything." He picked up a small stone and hurled it. The stone hit the base, echoing dully. He felt a strange satisfaction, brief but real. From that night, a dark seed began to grow in him. Every time he walked past the church, he would stop, stare, and whisper bitter words. "Are you proud of yourself? You saved no one. You're just a piece of plaster." The priest of the parish, Father Gabriel, once approached him kindly. "Mr. Ward," he said softly, "I see pain in your eyes. Let her heal you." Ethan laughed in his face. "Heal me? If your God exists, he's a monster."
A sudden gust of wind swept through the yard, scattering petals and smoke. The candles flickered out. Ethan steadied himself, finger tightening on the trigger. And yet, just as the shot broke the air, a flash of something moved before his eyes. A reflection? A shape? He couldn't tell. All he knew was that the world went white, then black, then silent. He fell. The gun clattered beside him. The statue stood untouched. When the townspeople found him, he was barely breathing. The weapon had exploded backward. the force of the blast tearing through his face and skull. He was rushed to St. Remiel Hospital, unconscious, unrecognizable. The doctors fought for hours. When he awoke 2 weeks later, his head was wrapped in bandages. He couldn't speak. He couldn't remember the sound of his own voice. And worst of all, a piece of his skull had to be removed to relieve pressure. The doctors said he would need to live for months, maybe years, with part of his brain exposed under a transparent shell, a constant reminder of that night. But something else began to happen too. Every night, when the ward fell silent and the lights dimmed, Ethan saw it. A soft green light glowing at the corner of his hospital room, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. And sometimes, within that light, the faint outline of a woman, standing still, watching him.
The statue had stood in St. Remiel for almost a century, carved by a nameless craftsman in Italy and brought over by missionaries. It was said to have survived a fire that burned half the old church down. The marble surface was smooth as bone, the eyes carved with such tenderness that many swore she looked alive. For generations, people prayed at her feet, for rain, for healing, for peace. Some claimed miracles had happened there, a child recovering from a fever, a blind woman seeing again, a man rescued from a mine collapse. The stories grew, passed from grandmother to child, from candle to candle. But for Ethan Ward, those stories were poison. He remembered Clara's voice telling one of them once, years ago, while tucking Noah into bed. "She protects those who ask," she had said softly. Ethan, sitting in the doorway, had scoffed. Then why doesn't she protect everyone? Clara had looked at him sadly, the way one might look at someone drowning but refusing a hand. "Because not everyone asks," she said. That night haunted him. It came back now in flashes every time he saw the Virgin's face. Weeks before the accident, the parish had begun restoring the old statue. Volunteers from town cleaned, repainted, and repaired the damaged base. Ethan's neighbor, Mrs. Donnelly, had asked him to help with the scaffolding. "You're an engineer," she said kindly. "You could make sure it's safe for us." He refused. "You think I'm building a pedestal for superstition?" But he still passed by every day, just to look. At first, it was simple curiosity. Then it became something darker. He found himself staring too long, wondering why her eyes seemed to follow him, why her lips seemed to hold that faint, knowing smile. Once, late at night, he returned from the bar and stood before her again. The moonlight bathed her in silver. For a second, the surface of her face seemed to move, or maybe his drunken mind imagined it. He stepped closer, squinting. "Don't look at me like that," he whispered. The air was still. Somewhere, a church bell chimed. He raised his hand, ready to touch the cold marble cheek, but stopped when he noticed a rosary dangling from her fingers. It was Clara's rosary. He recognized the small cross he'd seen countless times in her hands. Father Gabriel had taken it from her coffin and placed it here as a symbol of her devotion. His throat tightened. He clenched his fists. "You don't get to keep that," he hissed. He reached up and tore the rosary away. The chain snapped, scattering beads across the pavement. The sound, small, fragile, echoed through the night like breaking glass. He froze, staring at the beads rolling away, some falling into the cracks between stones. For a moment, guilt flickered. Then rage swallowed it whole. He turned and walked away.
The next morning, Father Gabriel found the broken rosary. He saw it deeply, but said nothing to the townspeople. Instead, he lit a candle and prayed silently. "Forgive him, Lord. He does not yet know what he is doing." Later that day, Ethan saw the priest at the grocery store. Father Gabriel smiled at him as if nothing had happened. "Good morning, Mr. Ward," he said warmly. "How are you holding up?" Ethan didn't answer. He just stared, cold and hollow. "God still loves you even if you don't love him," the priest added gently. That was the last time Ethan saw kindness as anything but mockery. As the festival drew near, decorations began to cover the town. The churchyard shimmered with lanterns and white lilies. Children rehearsed hymns. Mothers prepared food for the celebration. To Ethan, it was unbearable. He felt like a man suffocating under someone else's joy. He began drinking earlier each day. His hands shook even when he wasn't drunk. Sometimes he would wake at night and find himself standing by the window, staring toward the church, murmuring to no one. Then one evening, while sorting through his garage, he found Clara's old Bible, wrapped in a cloth, covered with dust. It had fallen behind a shelf. When he opened it, a photo slipped out. It was of Noah, smiling in front of that same statue, holding a small candle. His breath caught. He looked at the photo, then at the weapon he'd been assembling. His fingers brushed over the image. For a second, he almost smiled. Then he whispered, "You both believed in her, and look where that got you." He folded the photo, placed it in his pocket, not out of love, but as proof that faith was a lie. That night he dreamed of the statue. In his dream, the Virgin stood before him, eyes shining, mouth moving but no sound came out. Behind her, Clara and Noah stood in light. When he reached out to them, they began to fade. He tried to run, but his legs wouldn't move. The light grew brighter until it burned. He woke up screaming, drenched in sweat, his heart hammering like a drum. He didn't know it yet, but the dream was the first sign. The line between his rage and something beyond it was beginning to blur.
The morning of the feast arrived wrapped in gold. Sunlight spilled over the rooftops of St. Remiel, touching every window, every bell tower, every flag that fluttered in the cold December wind. The town was alive with joy, laughter, music, and the smell of bread drifting from the square. But inside Ethan Ward's house, the light could not enter. Curtains drawn, bottles scattered across the floor. On the table, the crude metal weapon waited, like a secret no one should ever hold. Ethan sat beside it, staring at the barrel as though it were an eye staring back. His own reflection shimmered faintly on the steel, pale, exhausted, hollow. He hadn't slept for 2 nights. The dream kept returning, the statue's face turning to him, her lips moving, whispering something he could not hear. Every time he woke, he swore he saw light in the corner of the room, faint, greenish, breathing. He told himself it was just his brain misfiring. The doctors had said he was under too much stress, hallucinations, fatigue, guilt. words meant to patch a wound that wouldn't close. But this morning, the silence inside him broke. He poured a glass of whiskey and muttered, "Let's end this, once and for all." He loaded the weapon. His hands were steady, frighteningly steady. Outside, the bells of St. Remiel began to ring, calling people to the Mass of the Immaculate Conception. Ethan flinched at every chime. Each note felt like a hammer against his skull. He opened the door and stepped out. The cold hit him, sharp and clean. His breath came in clouds. Families passed him on the street, smiling, carrying candles and flowers. None of them noticed the man with dead eyes walking among them. The church stood at the heart of town, dressed in banners of white and blue. Children's voices floated from within, singing Ave Maria. Ethan stopped at the gate. From where he stood, he could see her, the Virgin statue gleaming in the morning sun, her face lifted toward heaven, hands open in welcome. The very image that haunted him for years. He gripped the weapon tighter beneath his coat. His pulse roared in his ears.
He waited until the Mass began, until the square emptied as the faithful entered the church. Then, slowly, he walked across the yard. His boots crunched over the gravel. The scent of lilies hung in the air, mixed with wax and smoke. The statue towered before him now, silent and serene. For a brief, fleeting moment, something inside him cracked. A memory, soft and distant. He saw Noah again, small hands clasped, praying beside Clara. He heard laughter. He smelled rain. And then silence. The crash. The screams. He shook his head violently. "No, don't! Don't you dare make me feel again!" He lifted the weapon, his finger trembling on the trigger. At that exact moment, the church doors opened. Father Gabriel stepped out, holding a basket of candles. He saw Ethan immediately, the way one sees a nightmare made real. "Ethan!" the priest shouted, dropping the basket. "What are you doing?" "Stay back," Ethan barked. His voice cracked. "You think she's holy? Watch me prove you wrong." The priest's face paled. "Ethan, please!" But the rest of his words drowned in the wind. Ethan raised the gun, his finger trembling on the trigger. At that exact moment, time seemed to freeze. The air grew heavy, pressing against his skin. The world narrowed to the space between him and her. Man and marble, hatred and peace. Then, he pulled the trigger. The sound tore through the courtyard like thunder. But instead of the sharp crack of a bullet, there came a deeper, deafening roar. A burst of light exploded from the barrel, white and green, blinding. Ethan was thrown backwards as if hit by an unseen force. He crashed onto the stones, the metal twisting and burning. For one instant, he thought he saw her move. Not the statue, her, the Virgin. A figure of light stood before the statue, the same shape, but alive. Eyes luminous, face full of sorrow,
and mercy. Her voice, though soundless, pierced him like thunder in his soul. Why do you wound yourself, my son? Then darkness.
When Ethan opened his eyes, the world was noise and pain. He was lying on the ground, his face wet with blood, his body shaking uncontrollably. The crowd had gathered. Screams, footsteps, someone calling for help. He couldn't see properly. One eye was blind with blood. His ears rang. He tried to move but collapsed again, the weight of his own head unbearable. The last thing he saw before slipping into unconsciousness was the Virgin's face, untouched, gazing down upon him. No crack, no damage. Only that same eternal calm. At the hospital later, doctors whispered about the miracle. One said, "The gun exploded inward." Another, "It's impossible. It's as if the pressure reversed." Ethan drifted in and out of dreams, hearing voices, hearing prayers. They told him later that Father Gabriel had prayed over him as they carried him away, that no one could explain how the statue remained pristine, not even a chip on her robe. But Ethan remembered only one thing, the light. The same green light that burned behind his eyes even when they were closed. He would soon learn that the true punishment and the true mercy had only just begun.
When Ethan Ward woke again, it was not to light but to darkness. Thick, humming darkness filled with distant sounds. Footsteps, machines, faint whispers drifting in and out of reach. He tried to move, but his body did not answer. A dull, crushing weight pressed against his skull. Then a voice, calm, steady, clinical. "Mr. Ward, can you hear me?" He opened his mouth to speak, but only a breath escaped. "Don't try to move," the voice said. "You're in St. Remiel Hospital. You've been here for 12 days." He blinked. The room came into blurry focus. White walls, a monitor blinking with green lines, the faint smell of antiseptic and iron. When he tried to lift his hand, pain shot through him like lightning. His chest tightened. His head pulsed with every heartbeat. "Your skull took severe damage," said the doctor, a tall man with tired eyes. "We had to perform a decompressive craniectomy, remove part of your skull to relieve the pressure." Ethan stared blankly. The doctor hesitated, then continued gently. "You'll notice a hollow feeling on one side. There's a protective shell now. It's temporary. You'll need to be careful, very careful." The words sank slowly into Ethan's fogged mind. Part of his skull, gone. His head open to the world, protected only by a layer of plastic and faith in fragile medicine. The doctor added softly, "It's a miracle you're alive at all." Miracle. The word cut him like glass. He wanted to laugh, but the sound caught in his throat. A miracle? No. If anything, he thought it was punishment. The next few weeks blurred together in waves of pain and silence. Bandages were changed, wounds cleaned, tubes replaced. The nurses spoke kindly, but their pity burned him more than their needles. When Father Gabriel came to visit, Ethan turned his face away. "You shouldn't be here," he croaked, his voice rough and weak. "I go where there is suffering, even if I am not wanted. I don't want your prayers. Then I'll pray outside your door." And he did. Every evening the priest's voice could be heard in the hallway, low and steady, Ave Maria, gratia plena. Ethan pressed a pillow over his ear, but the words always found him.
One night, the pain was too much to bear. The medication had worn off. The machines beeped like distant bells. He lay staring at the ceiling, his breathing shallow, his thoughts twisting. Why hadn't he died? Why did she let him live like this, broken, half a man? He turned his head toward the window. Beyond the glass, the town was asleep under a pale moon. And then he saw it. A faint green glow at the corner of the room, soft, pulsing, like the shimmer of candlelight underwater. At first, he thought it was a reflection from a monitor, but the machines were on the other side. The glow grew stronger, spreading along the wall, touching the ceiling. Ethan's breath quickened. "What?" he whispered. And then he saw her. Not clearly, just a silhouette within the light. A woman's shape draped in something that flowed like smoke. She didn't move, she didn't speak, but the light radiated warmth, and for a moment, the pain in his head eased. He blinked. Tears stung his eyes. "Get out!" he whispered hoarsely. "You're not real!" The figure remained. "Leave me alone!" he cried, trying to reach for the call button, but his arm was too weak. Then the green light flickered once and vanished. The room was dark again. The heart monitor beeped steadily. The air smelled of alcohol and steel. Had he dreamed it? He turned his head toward the window once more, and for the briefest instant, he thought he saw a reflection there. Her face, gentle and sorrowful, looking back at him. The next morning, a nurse entered and froze. "Mr. Ward," she whispered. He looked at her, puzzled. The nurse pointed to the windowsill. Someone had placed a white rose there, fresh, still wet with dew. Ethan frowned. "Who brought that?" "No one," she said. "It was already here when we came in." The priest came later that day and saw it too. He smiled faintly. "Maybe someone's praying for you." Ethan said nothing. But deep inside, something shifted, small, fragile, like the first crack in ice.
Days passed. Each night the light returned, sometimes faint, sometimes bright. He began to wait for it, though he told himself he wasn't. It never frightened him after that first night. Instead, it comforted him. An invisible visitor who brought no words, only presence. The doctors said he was recovering faster than expected. The swelling had subsided, the wound was healing cleanly. But Ethan knew there was more to it than that. Once, when the nurse changed his bandages, she gasped. "What is it?" She hesitated, then whispered. "It's strange. The skin around the incision, it's glowing, just a little, like light beneath the surface." Ethan stared at her. "That's impossible." She smiled nervously. "Maybe it's just the reflection." But that night, he saw the glow himself, faint green veins of light tracing the edge of the scar. It should have terrified him. Instead, he felt peace for the first time in years. He whispered into the darkness, "Why me?" The light pulsed once, soft as a heartbeat. And somewhere in that stillness, he heard a whisper, not with his ears, but in his soul. Because even the broken can be remade. He wept silently, the tears soaking into his pillow. For the first time since the crash that took Clara and Noah, Ethan prayed, not with words, but with longing. And though he did not yet know it, that night was the beginning of his redemption.
Days passed. Each night the light returned, sometimes faint, sometimes bright. He began to wait for it, though he told himself he wasn't. It never frightened him after that first night. Instead, it comforted him, an invisible visitor who brought no words, only presence. The doctors said he was recovering faster than expected. The swelling had subsided. The wound was healing cleanly. But Ethan knew there was more to it than that. Once, when the nurse changed his bandages, she gasped. "What is it?" he asked. She hesitated, then whispered, "It's strange. The skin around the incision, it's glowing, just a little, like light beneath the surface." Ethan stared at her. "That's impossible." She smiled nervously. "Maybe it's just the reflection." But that night he saw the glow himself, faint green veins of light tracing the edge of the scar. It should have terrified him. Instead, he felt peace for the first time in years. He whispered into the darkness, "Why me?" The light pulsed once, soft as a heartbeat, and somewhere in that stillness he heard a whisper, not with his ears, but in his soul. Because even the broken can be remade. He wept silently, the tears soaking into his pillow. For the first time since the crash that took Clara and Noah, Ethan prayed, not with words, but with longing. And though he did not yet know it, that night was the beginning of his redemption.
The nights in St. Remiel Hospital had grown strangely peaceful. The hum of the machines no longer bothered Ethan. He could sense the rhythm of the ward, the distant footsteps of nurses, the whisper of curtains drawn, the faint sighs of the sick. But what calmed him most was the light. Every night it came, soft, green, alive. It entered the room quietly, as if respecting his pain, and settled near the foot of his bed. At first, Ethan thought it was his mind, hallucinations from medication or trauma. But when he reached out one trembling hand, he could feel warmth radiating from it. Not like heat from a lamp, but a living warmth, gentle and deliberate. And within that light, sometimes, he saw the faint outline of her, the same presence he had tried to deny. A woman clothed in radiance, a veil like mist, eyes that seemed to see through his soul and still somehow forgive it. He stopped calling the nurses when it appeared. He stopped pretending it wasn't real. Each time she came, his pain receded. The headaches that usually raged at midnight softened until they were no more than an echo. Even his trembling hands stilled. Sometimes, when he closed his eyes, he could hear something, a melody, like a mother humming to a child. It reminded him of Noah, his little boy. He used to hum lullabies when putting him to sleep long ago, before the accident, before the anger, before he turned his grief against heaven. That night, Ethan whispered, "If you're real, tell me why." No answer. only the sound of the machines and the faint hum of air conditioning.
Days passed. Doctors called it miraculous recovery. His wound was closing faster than any of them expected. The swelling in his brain had reduced almost entirely. "You might walk again soon," the doctor said, astonished. "I thought you said my motor function would never return." The doctor smiled, shaking his head. "I did. I was wrong." Father Gabriel came more often now. He didn't preach. He simply sat by the window, rosary in hand, and prayed quietly. One morning, Ethan said, without looking up, "She comes to me." The priest's fingers stopped moving on the beads. "Who?" Ethan met his eyes. "Her, the Virgin. I see her light." Father Gabriel didn't speak for a long time. Then, softly, "Miracles don't happen because we deserve them. They happen because God wants us back." Ethan's throat tightened. "Then why save me? I mocked her. I tried to destroy her image." The priest looked at him with gentle sorrow. "You can destroy stone, Ethan. You can even destroy yourself, but you cannot destroy love." That night, the light returned brighter than ever. The walls of the room glowed with emerald fire. Ethan felt weightless, no pain, no fear, just awe. The figure appeared fully now, luminous and real, yet somehow not bound by the room. Her face was calm, her eyes like wells of mercy. Ethan could hardly breathe. He struggled to speak. "Why me?" Her voice was like music, soft yet filled with command. "Because you once loved deeply, and love cannot die, it can only be lost. I come so you may find it again." Tears spilled down his cheeks. "I don't deserve forgiveness." "No one does," she said. "Yet it is given." He closed his eyes, weeping silently. When he opened them again, she was closer, close enough that he could feel the air stir, close enough to see the faint shimmer of light where her hands hovered over his bandaged head. Then he felt it, warmth spreading through his skull, through his chest, through the emptiness that had lived in him for years. His body trembled as pain gave way to peace, and beneath her hands, the wound that once marked his blasphemy began to shine. The faint green light glowing through the bandage like dawn beneath the horizon. He heard her whisper one last time, "This light is not to blind, but to heal. Let it guide you." And then she was gone.
The church was empty, except for Father Gabriel kneeling in the front pew. The priest turned when he heard the door creak. "Ethan!" Ethan hesitated at the entrance, then slowly walked down the aisle. The echo of his footsteps filled the sacred space like penance. I came to confess," he said, his voice trembling. The priest's eyes softened. "Then let us begin." Ethan sank to his knees. For a moment, the weight of silence pressed on him like stone. Then everything inside him broke loose. "I hated God," he said. "After Clara and Noah died, I hated everything that reminded me of him. I cursed him. I wanted to hurt him, even if it meant hurting everyone who believed." Tears slid down his face. "I told myself faith was weakness, but really it was fear. I couldn't face what I lost, so I turned it into anger."
Father Gabriel listened quietly, head bowed. Ethan continued, his voice raw. "The night I tried to destroy the statue. I thought if I could break her image, maybe I could break the pain. But I only destroyed myself." He took a shaking breath. "And then she came. In the hospital. The light, that green light, it wasn't a dream. It was her, Father. She forgave me." The priest whispered. "And what did she ask of you?" Ethan looked up, eyes glistening. "To forgive myself. To find love again." Father Gabriel placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then you must live that forgiveness, Ethan. Confession isn't only about words, it's about rebirth." The church bells rang outside, slow, solemn, beautiful. After the confession, Ethan walked to the statue once more. The air smelled of rain and roses. Candles flickered at her feet, their flames trembling like living souls. He knelt before her, this time not in anger, this time in surrender. "I don't know why you came to me, but thank you for saving me, for reminding me that love still exists, even after death." A breeze stirred, lifting a few petals from the candle's wreaths. For a moment, he could swear he heard a voice, faint but unmistakable. "Love never ends, Ethan. Only hearts do. And even broken ones can shine again." He lowered his head, tears falling freely.
In the following days, the people of Saint Remiel began to notice something strange. Every evening, as the sun set, a faint green glow appeared around the statue, soft like the breath of dawn. It didn't flicker or fade. It pulsed gently, in rhythm with the church bells. The scientists who came to study it found no source, no reflection, no logical cause. But the faithful didn't need explanations. They called it the light of mercy. And soon, people came from far away, from other towns, even other countries, to see it. Many claimed the light healed them. Some said it gave them peace after years of despair. Ethan never sought attention. He spent his days helping at the church, repairing benches, cleaning the garden, welcoming the pilgrims who arrived to pray. Sometimes children would ask him, "Sir, is it true you saw the Virgin Mary?" He would smile, a soft, humble smile. He'd say, "I saw forgiveness, and that's the same thing." One evening, after lighting candles by the statue, he felt something warm brush against his hand, like a small palm resting there. He turned quickly. No one was near, but in the fading light, he thought he saw two silhouettes standing just beyond the gate. A woman and a little boy, hand in hand, watching him with peace in their eyes. Clara, Noah. His breath caught. A single tear slipped down his cheek, but this time it wasn't from grief. He whispered, "I'm coming home soon, but not yet. I still have work to do." The figures smiled before fading into the evening mist. That night, Ethan knelt once more before the Virgin statue. The green light surrounded him again, softer now, like an embrace. He bowed his head and prayed, not for forgiveness, but for others who still carried the same pain
he once did. And somewhere, far above, the same gentle voice whispered, "Blessed are those who find peace after the storm."
A year passed since the night of the green light. Saint Remiel had changed. The once quiet town had become a place of pilgrimage, not for spectacle, but for healing. Every evening, people gathered around the statue, candles in hand, praying for peace, forgiveness, and hope. Ethan Ward lived quietly among them. The man who once cursed heaven now spent his days building benches, planting roses, and listening to strangers tell their stories. He never spoke of himself unless asked, and when he did, his words were simple. Mercy isn't something you deserve. It's something you receive when you finally stop running. The doctors still called his recovery impossible. The scars on his head remained, but the pain was gone. Sometimes, when he knelt in prayer, he felt warmth, not from the candles, but from within. One evening, as the last bell of dusk faded, the green light appeared again, brighter than ever. It surrounded the statue, spilling gently across the churchyard, bathing everyone in a calm, radiant glow. Children gasped. The elderly wept. Ethan bowed his head, his heart overflowing. He whispered, "Thank you." And though no sound came, he felt the words answered, not with thunder, but with silence so full of love it could only belong to her. From that night on, the green light never returned, but the peace remained in the town, in the hearts of its people, and in Ethan's soul. They called it the miracle of mercy, but Ethan knew better. It wasn't a miracle of light, it was a miracle of forgiveness. And for the first time in years, he smiled, truly smiled under the same sky that once felt empty, now filled with grace.